Hello and welcome to the Ignite Community Podcast, where our goal is to equip, inform, and challenge. My name is Josh, and I'm your host today. I am joined today by Pastor Jennifer Kelly, Women's Pastor of Ignite, and Pastor Chris Lineberger, the Worship Pastor at Ignite. So, today we're talking about kids, and specifically tough questions that your kids ask. I think this is going to be funny. I think it's going to be fun. But first off, just for the audience, if you'll just tell us how many kids you've had, if you plan to have any more.
Is this confessional or like?
No, really just establish why you get to talk about this podcast, right? We know you both have kids. In fact, you both have the same number of kids. So.
Wow.
Jen, if you want to start.
So I have Caitlin is my firstborn. She is 12, getting ready to turn 13 in a couple months.
Oh, boy.
My Chloe girl is 11. And then we took a decade off and had Adeline May, who is 17 months old. And
Restart.
If it was up to my husband, we would have 10 children. But we are not going to have any more children.
10 children equals no money.
No,
That's
so true.
Very true. Well, I have 3, and Jericho is our oldest. She just turned 12. We have Journey, who is 10, and we have Jasher, who is 6. He's our only boy. And then we have lots of animal children, but they're not going to ask tough questions.
You do have a lot of animal children. I've been to your house. They may actually outnumber your real children.
They definitely do.
Let's start off with an easy question. Who's your favorite child?
I think I can answer that pretty easily.
No, don't answer that. That was rhetorical.
I definitely have favorites in moments. I don't have favorites altogether, but there are definitely moments where some are more special.
All right, so in all seriousness, all parents eventually have many tough questions, right? Part of being a parent is being asked the tough questions. One of the things I hated as a kid was my dad always said, because I said so, right? That was his default, so he never had to answer any of my questions. But what has been your favorite tough question that your kid has asked you and that maybe you didn't even know how to answer at the time?
My favorite? Oh, man. Jen,
or maybe least favorite.
Maybe you should go first. Do you have?
Oh, yes.
I'll think about this while you talk.
Because I have all girls, and specifically 2 that are getting ready to be a really fun age. So one time a couple years ago, Caitlin and Chloe, I can remember it like it was yesterday. They were giggling, and they were like all red-faced, and they came out, and they were like, "Mom, we have a question for you." And I was like, okay. And Chloe is my wild card. She's the one who is like, I will ask the question. So I'm sitting down and they're looking at me and Caitlin's like hiding. And Chloe goes, okay, Mom, really? Like, I really want to know, where do the babies come out of? Is it in the butt?
Oh.
Like, literally asked that question. And I was like, I'm not ready for this one yet.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a couple years ago.
So what did you say? You said yes to butt.
No, I did not say. I said no.
Is this PG-13? What is this podcast rated at?
PG-13.
Okay.
So I did not lie to my children. But given the age that they were at, I said an appropriate answer that was age specific. More of like, no, the baby comes out of other parts of the womb in our body, and kind of answered it that way.
It's good. So you, without telling them every single detail, you'd still told them the truth. You did not tell them a stork dropped them off.
Correct. No.
I think my most, favorite, like, fun question, obviously, is, we do the whole Santa Claus thing at our house. Like, my favorite, like, it's been really fun for the kids to do that. But yeah, definitely Jericho, our oldest, obviously she was figuring things out. She was so much so like investigating that she would see our phones. She would see when we posted that Santa came. And if it would be like 12 a.m. on Christmas morning, she's like, wait a second, y'all may have still been awake at this time. She's trying to put them all together. So when she actually asked us, we told her the truth. She was like 11, and it actually was really fun. My most fun or favorite question to give the answer to was actually like when she's coming to middle school, and I had a really great conversation with her about boys and how they're changing and how the view of the way they see you is changing. I actually enjoyed that conversation a lot. She may not have, but I did.
Yes, well, we should bring Jericho on to ask her.
Jericho, what did you think about
Jericho
Dad
and Chloe?
Yes.
So the obvious thing here is that when kids are really young, so those that don't know, my son is 5, right? I don't get a lot of really tough questions, although there have been some. It doesn't matter how much you answer, but when they get older, so and especially you two in particular, having a 12-year-old and then that middle child, you both have that same kind of dynamic, only Jasher may be a little bit older than Addison, but
Adeline.
Gosh, I have a friend named Addie. I'm sorry, Addie. Should just went with Addie.
Just May. Yeah, it's fine.
How do you handle that tough question with your different kids? Is it important to actually answer the question, or is there a time to deflect?
You want?
Yeah, so I'm actually really passionate about this question. One of the things that I learned from Fuller in our leadership class is that you cannot speak into anything that you don't have authority within. That was really freeing for me. But as I was thinking about that from a parental and like where God has given me authority, right? And as parents, God has given us authority to speak into the lives of our children from a biblical perspective. But so many of us are afraid or try to sweep issues underneath the rug where we don't need to be. And it's funny because as Christians, we oftentimes insert our viewpoint or our opinions in other places where we don't necessarily have authority. But when it comes to our kids, right, we oftentimes, I don't know what to do, or how do we wrestle with this, or how do we talk about it? So absolutely, even if they're too young to talk about some maybe hurtful issues or sexual issues or all that kind of stuff, I don't think that we should ever shy away from them. I think it's okay to say, hey, honey, I don't know. Let's figure this out together or pray about it together. But always, always, always be available to give an answer or discover it alongside of them, because you are the person that God placed to bring authority and guidance and love and wisdom into their lives.
Yeah, and I think for me, if Jericho asked me a tough question, I would probably respond first in a question, and I wouldn't be deflecting. I'm like, why are you asking?
That's
I
good.
want to understand why this is on your heart, your mind. Did somebody say something to you? Are you just figuring things out, whether it's with your body or even spirituality that you're just been questioning? Maybe you heard something at Radiate. Maybe a friend on the bus said something that you overheard. Like, give me some context to why this is coming up, and then I think it puts me in a great position to know how to answer the question best. And obviously, as parents, we can relate to what it was like as a 12-year-old. We didn't have things figured out, but now in hindsight, most of the things that our parents told us actually were correct and right. And so I think if we can also answer it in a perspective that is mature, responsible, biblical, but in a way that they can relate to it. Not just because, well, that's the way it is. You just have to trust that I understand the best because I'm your parent. I don't really believe in that. I mean, sometimes if they're not coming to a place on time, you just need to get here because I'm telling you to. That's okay. But when they actually have a real tough question, as a parent, it's my responsibility to meet them where they're at and give them the biblical truth to their question.
Yeah, I think you guys bring up such a great point of what is, I feel, so negative about the idea of because I said so, is that if a child hears because I said so enough, they're not going to come to you with their question, right? Because they know that you're not actually going to answer them. I think what you said is so important, that they feel very comfortable in asking you, like you want them to come to you with the tough questions, right? So I think that you both kind of hit that, and I really appreciate that because I think that's so important as a parent for when Landon gets older. Now, a lot of you, I know, Chris, we've had discussions on theology. You're going to start getting passionate. Your neck's going to blow out. We know, Jen, if you don't know, she loves theology as well. What about when your kid asks you a theological question, okay? Because obviously, as pastors, sometimes our theology is different from what culture says, right? Because we are pastors, because we're Christians, culture may say one thing, you know, even when it comes to issues of sexuality or even masturbation, all those kinds of things, they are different from what the secular viewpoint is. How do you approach those tough questions? And is it a matter of, hey, you need to be old enough to understand, or is it a matter of when the question comes, we're going to address it?
Do you want to go first on this one? Or you?
I mean, I can. You've gone first the last few times.
Yeah,
but
go for it.
I think that for me, it's obviously very important to address the question. And then also it's very important to give perspective biblically to, I would start, let me go back a little bit, because I was expecting Jen to answer first. So now I'll go, to give the world's perspective first, because that's what they already know. They already know what their friends think. They already know what the teacher has said, the professor has said. They already know what the news says. They already know what the ad says. They already know whatever Facebook or Instagram or whatever their influence is. They know maybe it's homosexuality, maybe it's another kind of cultural issue. And they're asking, Dad, what do you think about this? Or is this wrong? Or is this okay? Why can't I love who I want to love? Like, isn't that just a typically good thing? That's a great question. I would first address the worldview to make sure I'm understanding, is this how you're seeing it from the world? And then I would bring the Bible right there and say, as believers, this is why not only do I believe this is why Christians believe this. And I would try to answer it biblically, logically, and then try to show that there is always going to be a difference from the worldview than Christ's view, and then the Christian worldview. Whereas, like, as Christians, we're supposed to look at the world and how do we live in, and not just reject everything without, I mean, you can be a friend with someone that is a homosexual. You can be a friend and do life with someone. You can love someone that is a Muslim, and they have completely different religious beliefs as you. And so whatever the angle of the question, get the worldview first, because that's what they're already there, and then the biblical perspective, and teach them why I believe what I believe. I think it's very important not to just give them, this is because the Bible says so.
That's good.
There's power because the Bible says so, but unless I believe that the Bible is the authority and the truth that I'm going to live by, then Bible saying so means nothing.
You even see, I was so safe to say, you even see it as an opportunity to really teach completely.
If I do not teach in that moment my Christian worldview and biblical worldview, I have completely missed I've missed the opportunity.
That's good. So I think that's important for the audience to see that, like, this is not a oh my gosh moment, I can't believe this happening. In some ways it's like okay, this is an opportunity.
Oh man,
yeah.
I would thank you that you asked that question, because I do feel, I can't speak for Jen, but I do feel like I'm prepared to answer most questions from a biblical worldview.
That's good. Yeah, same.
Yeah, so that was a great answer. I think as I think through the questions that my girls have given me and questions that I hear from a lot of other kids, not only is it wise to know your theological perspective and ask why they're asking it, and to give it as a teaching moment from your biblical worldview. But I would say a lot of times that the questions that they ask, like, why does God allow people to go to hell? Or why, if two people are the same sex, why can't they love each other? These are legit questions that I'm talking through with my kids.
Not just adults who
Correct.
ask.
Correct.
These are the questions that our kids are asking. It's interesting to me that I think that when we get into the weeds of them, oftentimes they have an incorrect viewpoint then of God's nature. So we kind of, if we understand, like, maybe there's a not knowing the right, you know what I mean, notion of God's goodness and God's love, and the reason why God doesn't want anyone to go to hell. I mean, he sent his son. So let's talk about this question from a different viewpoint so that you can understand a little bit better about who God is, what he says, and then why he sets up certain parameters for us to abide by. And to go back to Chris, why that looks so different from the world. And then what are the ramifications in the way in which the world lives versus the way in which we live. So I said this in the last marijuana podcast. A lot of people think we're just so about no and what you can't do. And a lot of times our kids think we're everything about what we can't do because all my friends are getting to do all of these different things. And if we can invite them into God's story and God's message more of like, no, this is not about what you can't do. This is about how God wants you to live in freedom and joy and peace and patience and all this goodness with vibrancy, then I think that helps them see a different viewpoint than what they maybe would have thought of before instead of just a no.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're going to ask it later or not, but the idea, especially from a Christian perspective, of the relationship with Christ is more important than a belief system. And I think no matter what, the kids, the students, even all the way through college, they're going to be taught a belief system that they need to buy into. And what I'm trying to teach our kids is, yes, we do have a core value of beliefs as Christians, but the relationship with Christ, it's over that. You know, it's more than that. And if I can teach them the relationship with Christ while I'm answering their questions and giving them the perspective, to me, that's the most important thing that I can give them. Because I think we have a lot of 22-year-olds that believed all the right things. They're very far from Christ because their parents actually never taught them how to have a relationship with Christ.
Yeah. I mean, the common theme between both of y'all, I see, is this opportunity, which means a lot to me as someone who has a younger kid to know. I mean, that's kind of what I want to do, because I feel like a lot of times I see older kids who ask a lot of questions because they did not get answers when they were younger, and those questions never were answered. And so sometimes they fall away from Christianity because they feel as if, well, this just is not able to be answered, when really it can be.
Sure.
And I think what I would say is for people listening to this or watching this is, okay, you guys are both pastors. All three of you are pastors. You know, you are ready, possibly, if a child asks a tough theological question. What do you do if you're a parent and you do not know the answer, right? Or maybe you don't know the answer yourself, or you don't understand. Do you deflect? Do you lie to your child? How do you deal with that if you're not a pastor and maybe you don't know the answer?
I mean, what I would do if I was in that situation, I would give the best answer possible. If I was unprepared for the answer, and if it was theology, so it's not just maybe like Christian living or some kind of practical thing that you could answer as a parent, but if it's with theology, I would take them to a pastor that I trusted. So like their youth pastor, if Jericho is asking specific things about whatever it was, whether it's sin related or just like the world being created related, any kind of theological question, I would point them to their youth pastor that I would trust. Would Pastor Jake Lurkey, he can answer this. Or if maybe it's more female related, maybe Jake Lurkey should not be the one, but maybe there's a female leader that we trust, the perspective, a young Jen on the way, you know, that a young Christian Jen on the way that could give the answer.
Young Jen.
Hey, she mentioned the marijuana, so you watch that podcast. This is another plug before or after. Does that make sense? Get them to the right source if I'm not the one that can answer the question.
Yeah, and I would say it's okay to say, I don't know. Yeah. Like, if we could say that over and over again, I think our kids appreciate the fact that we don't know everything. I think that provides a commonality almost sometimes for you to be able to come in and have this moment where you can grow and learn something together with your children. I think we could do a better job more often if we did that. I think so many times we carry this burden of we have to know all the things, we have to be the right person all the time, and it does a disservice to our kids when we're like that. So if we could be vulnerable in those moments and say, hey, you know what, Jericho or Caitlin, or, you know, that's a great question. Let's find out together and then discover it, you know.
That's good. All right. You guys have been kind and easy to y'all. So you guys are both pastors. Lying's a sin.
My goodness.
Is it ever okay to lie to your child when you receive a tough question? Like maybe their hamster died, or is it
Sounds
ever
like there's
okay?
a story there.
Who wants to go first?
I think you should.
You should also see the podcast about lying.
Yeah.
This is just podcast plugs.
I feel like this is not a fair question. I think that I think what Pastor Josh is referring to is when he did his sermon a couple months back about asking for a friend and do animals go to heaven. And he made his presentation about his theological viewpoint and whatever. Anyways, I came home later that evening and real mom moment, right? Like this is where our theology sometimes we will throw it out the window when our kid is coming down the stairs and they're bawling and the hamster dies or the dog dies or whatever. And my first response was, oh, baby, Blaze is in heaven. It's okay. He's with Jesus. Like literally that was my first response. And what a human moment. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, I don't think that Blaze is in heaven right now with Jesus.
Conviction from your sermon.
But I will do whatever I can as a mom heart, right? Like to help empathize with you and to comfort you and to guide you. And those are very real
human
mothering even emotions that you want to protect and guide and comfort. And so I think that we have to be really, really careful there. I know it's a funny story, but I think a lot of times that we can do a lot of damage if we in the long run do throw out our theology just to comfort and wipe away tears and say it's okay and give incorrect answers. So yes, I did probably a very wrong thing, but it's a good lesson on larger scales, because I do believe if a lot of moms or parents or dads were honest with themselves, they could probably pinpoint a time too where they've told their children maybe theologically incorrect or something that God says, no, that's actually not right, but it's our children.
Oh yeah, I'm joking.
Yeah,
but we've all done that. Like I think of when Landon was so terrified that something was going to happen to me and Catherine because of the fact that he saw something on a game, or I don't know, someone said something he shouldn't. Maybe it was my grandfather died, and he was grasping death, and it's like I told him that, hey, we're not going to die today, but truth is we could die any moment. You know, there is those moments where it is that comfort, I think, comes through, and you wonder what's the best. Really.
Yeah, for me, I don't know of a serious question, and my kids are older now. Even Jasher's 6. If he asked me something serious, whether it was about sex, whether it was about curse words, I'm just trying to think of every category of something serious that he could ask me, I would not lie to him. Because if he's mature enough to ask the question, he's mature enough to receive the response for that question, because that means it's in his heart, it's in his mind, he's already wondering. The times when I think that we would deflect or whatever lie would be when it's really fun things, ask him about Santa Claus. Yeah, is Santa real? Is the Tooth Fairy real? Okay, all these things, are they real? And just because me and Crystal, we actually love the tradition, we grew up in the tradition, we don't see anything evil about tradition, let's just be real about this. We're going to tell you that they're real, or what I always do what Jesus did. When they ask a question, I ask them a question. And you know what I'll do? Is Santa real? I'll say, well, all those movies that you watch, is he real in those movies? They all seem to be real. So I don't try to blatantly lie, but let's be honest, they're going to find out one day that he's not. But we've been telling them the whole time that Jesus is real. But guess what, guys? Jesus really is real. So I do understand the weight of potentially misleading your children, even with fun things, because at some point they're going to have to say, man, you guys hid that from me, or you guys were like playing tricks on me, or you guys lied to me.
The Tooth Fairy.
This is why I do Santa the way I do it. You already know.
And that's okay. Any of those things. Those things, and if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I mean, I think Craig Rochelle said it. The difference between Santa and Satan is only like the letter T or N. It's like, could you just reverse it or whatever? And it's like, look, it's, as a parent, I'm responsible for the fun I'm having. But if they ask a serious question, even a 6-year-old Jasher asks something about homosexuality, I'm not gonna lie to him, and I'm not gonna avoid that, because he's either been exposed, or there's something that he's thinking about that I need to address. I'm going to be careful in the way I deliver it, because he's a 6-year-old. Does that make sense? But I'm not going to lie to him about something serious.
That's good.
This is good.
Yeah.
Now, is it ever different if they are asking about something? Is there ever a case, I guess I should say, for you, because Chris already talked about it,
No.
where maybe they're too young to hear about sex or, I know kids always say, like, when they're boys or girls, I'm going to marry mommy, I'm going to marry daddy.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's so cute. Is there always an age or is there a time where it's like, okay, you're not ready to necessarily have this conversation?
I think that so not to lie to them, but I will add on the caveat that we need to be able to discuss it in appropriate ways. So
Yeah,
Dr.
for sure.
Meg Meeker is one of my absolute favorite references and resources in parenting and advice, especially for young girls. And she has 3 rules of it. And one of the articles that she wrote was specifically because a young boy came up to his mom, and he was only like 5 or 6 or something like that, and said, "Hey mom, what is rape? What does that mean?" And she legitimately, like, is this an appropriate conversation that I should have with my 5 or 6-year-old boy? Where did you hear that? What is an appropriate response to that? And so you can check out Dr. Meg Meeker. She's really awesome, and she's a Christian, but she always says, and I brought the notes here, don't shy away from the conversation. Be clear and speak simply. Ask clarifying questions around it. And if there is hurt involved, address and explain that too. So I think that we can do, even with a 5-6-year-old boy who asks, like, oh my gosh, where did you even get that from? An appropriate response that is not lying, but that looks like, okay, where did you hear that from? And what do you think it means, right? Just like Chris says, ask a question with a question, because he's absolutely right. Jesus asked more questions than he ever did answers. And then we can kind of find out from there really what they understand of what that means, and say it's when, a man hurts a woman or a woman hurts a woman or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it can be different things, but we don't have to get into the weeds about it.
Correct.
To a young child.
More generic,
Correct.
not necessarily the details.
Correct.
That's good. That's very useful. Okay. It's easy to get caught up being the perfect parent, right? We feel that role. We feel that responsibility to raise a great kid. Now, I understand both of you are trying to raise 3 children. That can be tough. What goals do you have for your kids today, as far as what are you setting as a parent for your goals for your kids to reach?
Sure. Okay. I mean, obviously, I want them all to know Christ. I want them to have a relationship with Christ. That's very, very important for me. I want them to be independent, that they love us as parents, but they do not, like, if we died today, Jericho, in the 12 years we've had her, does she understand enough about Jesus and the world that she's going into that she is not completely at a loss? Like, I want them to be independent, to be able to think. I want them to be able to ask questions and challenge things. I don't want them to, just because, like I said, the Bible says so, just because mom and dad say so, just because their preacher says so. I want them to question the big answers in life. Me and Pastor Josh differ about how we think that God created the world. We think he both did, but we have differences, right? Well, like, if they're hearing even a message or a sermon in a good environment, I want them to be able to think freely and ask the question, hopefully, though, that they know how to do their own research, or we pour into them, that they can find the answer can be found in Christ. The answer can be found with scriptural truth. The trust in Jesus is enough to even trump the things that we can't answer, because they have this relationship. If they're meeting those goals, then that's huge. Also, how to love people that are different from you, that don't believe the same as you. That's very important. If I create a bunch of Pharisees, I have done the wrong thing, and they're not gonna know Christ, honestly, but they're gonna think they do. So I guess really quickly, those are some of the goals.
No, those are great.
So my husband actually does a really brilliant job in leading us in this area. We have a Kelly family type crest and even covenant that we talk to the girls about a lot. Yes, Lord, we wait for you. Your name and renown are the desires of our heart, is our family's like life verse. And within that, we have certain core beliefs that are true, that if you were to ask Caitlin and Chloe if they were sitting here right now, and you'd say, hey, what are your core beliefs in your family? What's true for you guys? And they would tell you, this needs to be a safe place, to never give up. There's like all these certain things that they could just say off the top of their head.
Let's bring Chloe and Kelly.
I know, you should.
See if they could do it.
Yeah. So I say that because I think every Christian parent would say our goal is for them to have a relationship with Jesus, right?
Yeah. Pretty common.
You would hope that
Yes.
they would.
Most
Yes.
Christian parents. I think a lot of times we have a hard time practicing that with our children or allowing them to have the space and the freedom and even being vulnerable enough, to where they feel absolutely loved and safe to be able to discover certain things, like Chris said. That's so vital. So I think that if we want them to be fully devoted followers of Jesus, right, we've got to keep our own priorities straight, love God, love our families, and then love others. And that requires a tenacious review of your calendar, of times, of conversation, of all these different things constantly. And even to where we admit when we screw up and, hey, Jen, your calendar's out of control. We got to review this. What does that mean? You haven't even seen Chloe do this thing yet. We just had a conversation the other day, hey, what was our core beliefs? What did we say the other day? Because somebody wasn't feeling particularly safe to talk about something. So we reviewed all that kind of stuff. So yes, my goals, I want them to become a fully devoted follower of Jesus, but how do we get them there? And I think that requires an enormous amount of strategic thinking, intention, and love for them in so many different things that we do.
Yeah, that's good.
Another goal that I have, this is just super practical, but I heard Andy Stanley say this one time, I want my kids to love us and love home enough that when they leave home, they want to come back.
Heck yeah.
and enjoy it, because I do want to create them to be independent, but I would love for them when they get out of the home to be man, mom and dad are some of the coolest people. And I mean, literally, and I can talk to them, I have this relation with them, for that not to be a goal. I think for them to move out of the house and then never see them except for Christmas would be terrible. Even if they live far away, I would want them to do whatever they could do to get home because they love being around us.
Yeah.
That's a selfish goal, but I feel like it's a good one.
No, it's a great goal. I think that all those are things that we can set. I know that I'll take away things from those even with my children. And, you mentioned a good point, which is, yes, it's easy to say, let's lead our children to be fully devoted followers of Christ, but it takes a lot of other goals to get there. Even in the church world, we're struggling or trying to find the answer to how do we lead adults to be fully devoted followers of Christ. So I think that's great. And I think what you said about all of the things about you answering the tough questions leads to a child who can actually dive into things for themselves and have a reason for what they believe. I think of that verse in 1 Peter where it's talking about have a defense of your faith. It's for them to be able to do that is because they've seen that modeled in you, that you're always willing to defend your faith, but also give them the ability to explore and ask those questions. So it's great. Okay. We're about to close it up, but I'm going to do roundtable, just ask you guys to say, as far as takeaways from this podcast, what do you want people to remember when it comes to tough questions from their kids? What are the key takeaways you want if it's something that they can practically take away and start doing today?
So say, I don't know when you don't know. Say I'm sorry, maybe a little bit more, I think. And then laugh, have fun, and just love on those kiddos. Keep discovering how God uniquely made them. So I think that would help them become fully devoted followers of Christ, have specific goals around that in a really cool, practical, and theological ways from a holistic viewpoint.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, really show them that you're listening. And I don't know if women struggle with this as much as guys do, but maybe I just have ADHD, but Jericho could be having, or Journey could be having a moment with me, and as a dad, I feel like I'm totally in, but my mind is actually 10 different other places. So if they are asking you a question, you need to hone in and get all other distractions away, even if that means, hey, let's go into another room because the TV's on. I want to be able to give you your full attention. I think that's important. And then another thing that we didn't even hit on, because I guess, the podcast title was when they ask us tough questions. I think that if you know that your children are going through things, just because you know of the environment they're in, you know of other things that they're walking through based off of their friends and the trends in culture. I think that we should be okay also asking them very tough questions, because, not to take too much time, but as Jericho is entering into middle school, I know that there's going to be a lot of things that she's going to hit head on. And to wait for her to ask these questions may be too late. And so before she started middle school, I asked her a lot of questions, and I just said, hey, we're going to have a father-daughter talk about some changes that are probably going to happen with your friends, with you, and some of the boys you know. And I could have waited to 8th grade if maybe that's when the question was going to come. That may have been too late. So I think as a parent, also understanding like it's okay for us to interject our own questions into their life to try to figure out how are they doing and how are they balancing out maybe the questions they're not actually verbalizing to us.
That's so good, because if you're not asking the questions or answering the questions, then someone will be.
Correct.
Someone else will do it.
So it's safe to say maybe if your kid isn't asking tough questions, that could be a red flag.
And maybe you should ask them some questions.
That's good. All right, Pastor Jen, Pastor Chris, excellent job. Your 3 kids, for both of you, are in very good hands, I believe. That's all that we're going to have time for. I want to thank everyone for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this, then please rate us on all the listening devices. Apple, give us 5 stars. If you did not like this, why are you still listening now? That's the real question. Do not rate us. Share with friends. Also, if you have topics or questions that you want to hear us talk about, please email us at podcast@ignitechurch.com. We would love to have a Q&A version of this and really find out what you guys are interested in. If you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, you can also comment below and let us know what you thought, or that if you have any questions that we can answer. And again, we always appreciate your time, appreciate you too, and we'll see you soon. Thank you everyone for joining us. Peace out.